Welcome back to our discussion about evaluation models. We're going to focus today and dig a little deeper into two major models and talk specifically about how those will impact your evaluation plan and things that you should be thinking about as you're determining, how you're going to build a plan to evaluate the program that you've identified. As I went through and read your thoughts and your comments about the program that you plan to evaluate, most of you did a really good job. I made some comments there. Some of you are still a little too broad, and that's fine. I think it'll become more clear to you as we go through the next few sessions how you can begin to focus that down and what you could do to make it a more focused and a more appropriate evaluation, picking the right portion of the program that you've identified. So, everything that you've identified could be defined as a community problem, community program, excuse me. Basically, there are programs that may be more nationwide. That's okay. They're still focused within a community. So what y'all have done fits into this discussion, I think, extremely well. We talked last week about the two models that are really program development models that have evaluation built into them. We're going to talk specifically today about the two models that really those are built around, and those are the Rossi model and the Kirkpatrick model. And I believe in my mind that those are the two most widely used evaluation models out there. Those are the two textbooks that I've used for a number of years in terms of teaching evaluation, whether it was in class or whether it was to practitioners that are doing evaluation, county extension agents and educators that are doing evaluations out in the field. They are the most practical. And, you're not going to pick one of those models. You're going to use aspects and pieces of both models as you build your evaluation. So don't focus specifically here as we go through this on that's the model I like, because as you build your evaluation, you really will use bits and pieces of both models as you put that together. So just to review, what's a program? A program is always going to be a comprehensive set of activities, events, experiences that lead to intended results. So as you're thinking about your evaluation and some of the comments I made to you, which part of that, which series of events and activities and which intended results are you going to evaluate? For instance, some of you had large nationwide programs and said, I'm going to evaluate the Boy Scouts, or I'm going to evaluate the 4-H club, or whatever it might be. That's great, but we're going to have to focus it down. And, which specific part of that program would you build an evaluation plan for? Would it be the leadership development aspect? Would it be the community service aspect? Would it be the impact that it has on young people's out of school activities? Those sorts of things. So start thinking about how you focus that down. The other thing I want you to think about is a few of you had an activity that you wanted to evaluate. That's probably not going to be sufficient. You're probably going to have to look a little broader at a more of a series of activities. So be thinking about that as we go through. Okay, so I just wanted to bring back up the definition of a program, because ultimately that's what we're going to evaluate as a program. We talked about this early. Okay, just another review, but what is evaluation? So, this is something that you do all the time, whether it's an informal or a formal evaluation. What we're going to focus on from here forward will be more of a formal evaluation, more of a systematic planning process that you will go through to develop your evaluation plan for the program that you've identified. So, informal is something that you do every day. Formal evaluation is where we'll be focused from here going forward. Okay. Some of the definitions of evaluation that are out there, and Rossi and Freeman's the very first one. Fitzpatrick's the third. You'll see some similarities in those. Rossi and Freeman define evaluation as a systematic approach to assess the design, implementation, and utility of programs. That's the evaluation that I use in every class that I teach. I think it's the most descriptive evaluation of what, most descriptive definition of what evaluation really is. Scriven just says it's judging the worth or merit of something. That's a good way to look at it. When you evaluate, you're trying to make a decision about something. Is it worth it? Is it good? Is it bad? So that's a pretty broad look at what evaluation is. And then Fitzpatrick in his textbook says that it's identification, clarification, and application of defensible criteria to determine the value in relation to those criteria. So all of those definitions are accurate. There's bits and pieces of all of those that you need to be considering. But, ultimately what we're trying to determine is, was a program effective? Is it worth doing again, and is it useful? So generally that fits into those definitions very well. So again, Rossi defines and talks about evaluation, says that program evaluation, more specifically, program evaluation is a systematic assessment of programs that are designed to improve social conditions and or individual and collective well-being. So this is where you need to really start thinking about what you plan to develop a plan for, what you want to develop a plan for. Will it fit into this definition here? So when you think about what a program is and you think about how you evaluate it, will what you have identified work here? Can you determine and can you evaluate the your particular program and how it's going to improve social conditions or the individual and collective well-being of those participants in the program? So it has to be something fairly specific. You have to have a set of evaluation questions, and that'll become more clear also as we go through the next few sessions. But think about, very specifically what aspects of a program would you evaluate, and how does that fit into here? What ultimately, what's the condition that we're trying to improve or we're trying to change within that educational program, and how would we measure that? That's where program planning, program development, and evaluation come together. We talked about this, and I just want you to keep in mind that we are not necessarily doing research. We're using some research techniques. We're using some research principles as we think about evaluation. But evaluation is simply done to determine the worth or value of a program. We are not trying to make a cause and effect relationship when we do evaluation. So, that's just something for you to consider as you're developing your plan, is that we're not going as deep into uh, that program and what those inference relationships could be. We just want to measure worth and value. So to that end, what we're doing is we're trying to determine, number one, is a program effective? So think about questions that you would ask related to the program that you've identified to determine if it's effective. Number two, are there things that could be improved or modified with the program to make it more effective? So, we've laid out a plan. There was a plan put in place for this program before it was implemented. Is it being implemented according to plan? Is the plan working? And if not, what could be modified? Where could we go next? So, once you've completed an evaluation, there's a very good chance that you've identified new opportunities or expanded programming opportunities, or maybe new audiences that could benefit from this program. So that's one of the main reasons that we evaluate, is because we want to look at where can we go next? What are some new things that we could do as a result of this program that we've done and evaluated? And then, ultimately, if something's not working, we need to know that so we can move on to something else. So it could be that we're evaluating to determine if we need to quit doing an educational program or a community program. So think about it, from a courtroom standpoint, okay? An attorney is going to make his case for his client to jurors using evidence, right? So we've all seen television shows, and we know that an attorney has all the information that he's going to put together to try to make his case to a jury about why his client should be innocent, or why his client should be awarded some judgment, or some sum of money, or whatever it might be. And he's using evidence. So he's gathered as much evidence as he could to build that case, right? To tell that story, to try to convince those jurors that what he's saying is true, and they should act on it. That's ultimately what an attorney does. So let's apply this and think about it in the case of an educator or someone who's implementing an educational program. An educator will make his or her case for the program, right? Not for his client, but for his program. Our jury are the stakeholders. That may be the nonprofit organization that's funding us or the foundation that's funding us. It may be a governmental body that's providing funding for our program. Those are our stakeholders. It could just be donors that we're working with, private donors, but those are our stakeholders. Those are our jurors, right? So we're using evidence that we gather through evaluation data to make our case to stakeholders so that they want to fund and agree with the benefits of our program. Very similar type of process if you really think about it. We're just not going to go to jail if we mess up. Be the main difference, I guess. So, but I thought that was a good parallel and a way to think about what we're trying to do with evaluation and how that parallels with something that you might be more familiar with. Okay, two types of evaluation, and you will see this. Uh, and again, I can promise you this will be something that you'll see on exams, and we'll talk about through the semester. Formative evaluations, just think about this is an evaluation that's done while the program is forming. So it's focused on the development of the program and how we improve the program, and it's done during the implementation and planning phases of the program. So formative is done as a program is forming. Summative is a summary. It's done at the end. Okay, so think of summative as an end summary of those evaluation data, and it focuses on those judgments. Is this a program that we should continue to do? Is this a program that we should adopt? Is it something that we could expand? Was it effective? Those are the things that we're trying to measure with summative evaluation. So formative is during the planning and implementation process. Summative is done at the end of our program. Some different types of evaluations. Needs assessment. Some people don't think of this as evaluation. This is very much evaluation. So, and this is done before we even have an idea of what our program might be, correct? I mean, we're looking right at this stage, we're asking a community or a group of stakeholders, what do we need? What are some things that would benefit this community? What are some things that are impacting this community in a negative way, possibly that we could address through a program? So, we're just focusing at this point on what's needed and what might we do to address those needs that a community might have. Okay. So that's very much an early stage type of evaluation. That's the planning phase. That's certainly a formative evaluation. Process evaluation is focusing on how a program is delivered. So that sometimes we call that monitoring evaluation. So a process evaluation looks at the once a program is being implemented, is the person who's delivering the information, is he or she delivering it according to the plan? Do we have effective teachers and effective instructors that are delivering the information, the educational information? Do we have activities that are age appropriate? Is it being delivered in a way that people can understand, whether it be language, whether it be education level, whatever it might be? So those are things that we're going to measure during the process. Very much formative evaluation. Okay, so this is being evaluated as it's being delivered. And when we find something in a process evaluation that maybe is a little bit off and needs to be tweaked, we can fix it on the fly and we don't get to the end and realize, man, we missed the mark, right? So it's very important that process evaluation be included in your plan, that we're going to be doing evaluation as the program is being delivered. So we're monitoring the program. Okay. Outcome evaluation, very much summative. So this is what we measure at the end that focuses on the changes that occur in our participants. Maybe it's knowledge, maybe it's a change in behavior, maybe it's adoption of a new practice, whatever it is, and we'll look more at those outcomes. But that is very much a summative evaluation, and then the impact because we had those outcomes, because our participants made those changes, what's the impact on society? And we'll look more in depth at that as well. But the first two are very formative in nature. The second two, impact and outcome, are very summative in nature. Okay, we're going to dig into the models a little bit. So we've talked about Rossi and Freeman's levels of evaluation. Y'all know that it's 4 levels. It's based on assessing a program from start to finish, so it's formative and summative, and we know that those levels build on each other. They're hierarchical. Okay, so the first level is program conceptualization and design, very formative in nature, right? Second level is program monitoring, and we just talked about that. That's evaluating as a program is being implemented. Third is impact and outcome evaluation. We'll talk about that. That's very summative in nature. And then ultimately, what's the cost benefit? What's the impact on society? So during program conceptualization and design, some things that you want to know and some things that you want to be asking as you're developing your plan is, do we really understand what the problem is? Can we define and describe what the problem is? Okay, so maybe we've said that youth are getting in trouble. Youth are getting into delinquent activities, whatever it might be. That's a problem, but can we define and describe that problem? When is it happening? Are there certain pockets of the population where it's happening more? Are there can we align that with certain school districts or certain times of day when kids aren't at school? So just understanding that if we say that it's water use or a water conservation, that's a great goal, but where's the most water being used in a community? Do we understand? Is it one particular part of a community? Is it one particular aspect within a home? Is it landscapes? Is it swimming pools? Is it golf courses? Is it parks? So, we need to be able to fully understand and describe what the problem really is. Then we need to be able to talk about the description, the extent, and the distribution of the target audience or the target population. So, we've defined that. Let's go back to that youth issue. So we know what the problem is, and we've defined that pretty well. It's probably not all youth. So can we narrow it down and target it down to a specific group of young people? And then within that group, can we fully describe them? Do we understand the socioeconomic background of those youth? Do we understand the family dynamics within those youth? Do we understand, where they live and where we can reach them and how do we get to them? So we've got to fully understand who that target population is. That is all part of how we evaluate the conceptualization and the design of our educational program. And then, we've said in the definition of evaluation that we work towards intended outcomes. Intended outcomes mean they've not been done yet. We intend to see those changes, right? So at the very beginning, we have to know what the goals and objectives of a program are in order to evaluate it at the end. You have to know what you're aiming at to understand whether you hit the target or not at the end. So you have to build that target up front, right? You have to understand completely what the goals and objectives are. And then do those relate directly to the problem? Is the educational program or the agency or the group that's going to deliver the educational program, can they do it? Are they capable? Do they have the expertise? Is it within their mission? So all those things are questions that we'll ask during conceptualization and design of an educational program. Then we'll start looking at the approach. Okay, is there an educational approach that is realistic, or is it just pie in the sky? It sounds really good, but there's no chance that it could be effective, right? So when you look at the actual conditions and you look at the approach, do those two go together? Can we make this thing work? Okay, those are questions that we'll ask early on. Does the approach account for the needed resources? We've talked a little about that early. So, does the organization have the resources, the expertise, the funding to do the educational program? That's a question we've got to understand. And then, is there an evaluation and interpretation plan using specific criteria for success? So we defined what the outcomes were, what the intended outcomes were. Can we build an evaluation to account for that? And then what interpretation means is, can we take that information that we gather from the evaluation and deliver that to stakeholders? That part comes later and is pretty simple if we have identified intended outcomes and we have an evaluation plan that will work towards those intended outcomes. Okay, monitoring. We're still in a formative evaluation. We're still early on in that pyramid. We're at stage 2 of the pyramid. We begun to implement the program. So we've said we had to clearly identify, we had to describe, we had to understand who our target audience is, who our target population is. The first question is, are we reaching that target population? So, we've said that our target population and who we hope to reach with some nutrition education programming was limited resource moms. Okay, limited resource moms in East Austin, for example. So that's who we said our target audience was. And we look at this program as it's being implemented, and we're seeing, working moms that are, very middle class that are participating, and we're glad they're participating. Right, they're getting information that's benefiting them and their family. But in the end, that's not our target population. And when we measure the impact that we built, the intended outcomes that we laid out, were very specific in trying to help limited resource families. We get to the end and we haven't reached limited resource families. We may have a program that was successful in some aspects, but it failed at reaching the target population, right? So if during program monitoring we realize that we're not reaching the target population, we need to make a change. We need to implement that change soon. It might be that we need to move the location. We might need to change the time of day. We might need to provide child care so that the target population can attend without having to worry about who's going to watch their kids during the program, right? We might need to have it on a Saturday because the target population works long hours, Monday through Friday. You'll just have to figure out what it is that could be causing you not to reach your target population, but you want to make those changes early. You don't want to get to the end and realize, well, we missed the mark, right? So is our program delivery consistent with what we said, with our design specifications, right? So, and if not, where are the variations? So as we're delivering, we said that we were going to do, certain amount of classroom education, certain amount of hands-on, certain amount of demonstrations. We get to the end, we realize that, or we're working through this, and we realize that we're not getting enough hands-on, we're not getting enough demonstration, whatever. We need to make those changes, right? We want to make sure, because what we built our intended outcomes around saying that they're going to learn this, they're going to see it, they're going to be hands-on and get to do it. And if we get halfway through and we realize that's not being done, we need to make those changes. We want to know if they're satisfied. We want to know if our participants feel like this is worth their time. If not, they're not coming back, right? If they're not satisfied, they're going to drop out of the program. The one thing about community programs that is different from other kinds of education, volunteer participation. They do not have to come, right? If they're not happy with it, if they're not seeing that it's benefiting them personally or benefiting their family, they're not coming back. So we want to measure that early and make sure that we're meeting the mark, that we're hitting the things that are going to benefit them. And then, look at resources. Are we burning through resources too fast? Are we going to be able to make it to the end? And if not, do we need to make adjustments there? Okay, we're going to move into summative evaluations within Rossi and Freeman here and talk more about the impact and the outcomes of evaluations. And what we're trying to measure here, this is at the end, and we've measured throughout. We've done evaluation throughout, but at the end, we're going to do a more broad evaluation that looks specifically at, did we hit our intended results? We said at the beginning that these were the goals and these were the objectives. Now at the end, we're going to go back and we're going to ask questions and do an evaluation that's aimed specifically at those intended results, and we're going to see if we hit them, right? Then, we'd like to be able to determine the net effects from the gross effects. In other words, there's going to be some changes that happen within a target population over a 6, 9, 12-month period of time that our program has been implemented. Okay. How much of that change can we take credit for? How much of it was a result of our program? The only way really to do that, we're going to have to ask, excuse me, we're going to have to ask the population to some extent based on the results or based on your participation in this program. Tell us about, the changes that you made. But we're going to have to be able to determine, because we want to tell a story about what our program did, not what happened to a young person, based on what they learned in school or based on other things that they've been participating in, but specifically, what did our program do? Okay, and then, we know there's going to be extraneous factors. We know that's going to happen over a period of time. If it's a real short-term program, maybe not. But a longer-term program, which is what most of these are, where participants are involved in a program for months, there are going to be extraneous factors that will either make results look better or make results look worse. Okay, so if it's a water conservation program and we've had a really wet year, well, that's gonna make people react differently, and it's gonna make potentially make a program look better because there's lots of water. If it's a situation with youth over a period of time, youth just mature and youth just change. They interact with different people and they participate in other activities. And there may be some other things that can enhance what we do or could hinder what we do with those kids. So we have to we need to be aware of what those extraneous factors could be and just be prepared to ask questions around that and to understand what impact those could have. Okay. We also want to be able to compare participants to non-participants or our participants over time. Let me explain what I mean here. So if you can very effectively identify a group of individuals who are very similar to your target audience or to your participants that are not participating in your program, and you can get them to participate in an evaluation, that works great. So you can compare a group of 14-year-old boys that went through your program to another group of 14-year-old boys that are very similar, that live in very similar conditions, that have very similar socioeconomic backgrounds, that go to the same school or live in the same community. If you can compare the group that participated to a group that didn't and see differences there, that is a really effective way to identify the outcomes or the impacts of your program. Otherwise, you're probably going to look at your participants over time. So you're going to measure some things before the program begins that are related to your participants, and then you're going to measure over time the change that happens in those participants as a result of your program. So, we're going to look at more of a pre-post type of an evaluation, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. So, whether it's simple or whether it's really complex, your outcome and impact evaluations are always going to be based on the goals and objectives that you identified at the beginning of this program. Okay, so Rossi and Freeman always comes back to the goals and objectives that you identified during the development phase of the program. And then finally, when you get to the top of the pyramid is cost evaluation. We talk in extension, we talk a lot about economic impact rather than cost evaluation. So what we're trying to do is look at the return on investment. Was the time, the effort that we spent with this program, is it worth it? Is there a return on the investment of resources that we put into this program? Okay, so a lot of times what we try to do, and many of our programs are based on economic impact. Almost all of our agriculture related programs are based on economic impacts, based on the changes that an ag producer made, what how much profit is that going to increase for him? What kind of economic impact is that going to have on the community based on their participation in a program? If it's water conservation, maybe it's more of an environmental impact, but that still is something that has cost implications to a community. So the fact that we have more water available, that we've conserved water, that we've cut the usage of water in landscapes or in homes or in agriculture, because they've adopted our practices of being more efficient in the use of water. There's a cost benefit there to a community. So there could be a social impact as well as an environment, or as well as an economic impact, as well as an environmental impact. All those can go together. So when we do those economic studies, we're trying to determine specifically what the economic impact to an individual and to a community is. That's really important. Okay, Kirkpatrick's model, his is more based on levels of evidence. It's a very simple model, and again, they lay together. This one is fits right directly into Rossi and Freeman. Rossi and Freeman talks about phases more and levels of evaluation. This talks more about levels of evidence, so it's more what we're evaluating is what Kirkpatrick looks at. He looks at 4 levels of evidence. So he looks at reaction. Okay. So when you think about reaction, that is customer satisfaction, right? It's, are our people happy? Are they satisfied with the program? Are they reacting well? Are they uh, continuing? Are they planning to continue their participation? That's level 1. So is that formative or is that summative? Well, clearly that's formative evaluation, correct? That's something that's done early in the program and done throughout the program to make sure that participants maintain their satisfaction and their interest in the program. That's what reaction is in Kirkpatrick's model. Okay. Level 2 is learning. Learning is just knowledge based uh, measurement. So it's important. Okay. It's very important that we measure a change in knowledge or a change in attitude of participants. That can be done. So we say a program is not a single activity. A program is a series of educational events, activities, and experiences. But learning can be measured with one single activity. Okay, so they can come to one. Let's say in session 1 we're going to teach about different sprinkler heads and how different sprinkler heads use different amounts of water in landscape irrigation. That's session number 1. We're not going to get into when we irrigate, how much we irrigate. We're just at this session we're just going to talk about sprinkler heads. At the end of that, we can do a test and we can measure, does the clientele understand more about the different kinds of sprinkler heads and where they might be applied than they did before they came to the program? Well, probably. So there was some learning, okay? So this is where formative and summative kind of melds together. It's formative from the aspect that we're measuring, is our clientele understanding the content? And if they're not, we're going to make a change in how we're teaching and the level that we're teaching. But we're also going to be able to pull some summative information out of this and be able to say that as a result of our educational program, our clients learned this and this and this, right? So that's a summative kind of measurement. So when we're measuring learning, that's something that we do throughout the implementation. So at each session, we're probably going to get a gauge on people's grasp of the content, and it's so that we can make changes if they're not understanding. It's also so that we can begin to build and go forward from there in terms of what we're trying to get to at the end. So it's formative and summative somewhat together. Level 3 looks at behaviors. Here's the thing that where this really fits into every model that you look at in terms of evaluation. You cannot have a behavior change without a level 2 change. Okay, whether it's learning or whether it's attitude, whether we've taught them something or whether we've changed their attitude, you are not going to have a behavior change unless you have a change in knowledge or a change in attitude. Not going to happen. That's why we say these build on each other. Okay, so we're going to teach them something, they're going to understand something better. Once they grasp the content, then we can begin to try to get them to change their behavior. So they have to understand, the difference in sprinkler heads and the different places where one sprinkler head is better suited to another. And then once they understand that, yeah, this fits better here, it's going to save water, but it's also going to cover my grass better. We're not going to have the corners that don't get water, that sort of thing. They're going to adopt that. Okay, so then they'll adopt that if it's cost effective and if they understand the benefits, they'll begin to see, they'll begin to adopt that and have that behavior change. You have to teach them, you have to convince them before you're going to see the behavior change. So level 2 always comes before level 3. Level 3 is going to be a result of level 2. That's the transfer of the information. And then level 4 is based on the behaviors, the change, the adoption of a best practice. What are the results? So you're not going to have learning unless they're satisfied, unless they continue to come. You're not going to have a behavior change or an adoption of practice unless they've learned something. And you're not going to have results unless you have a behavior change or an adoption of practice. So you can't go from 1 to 4. You have to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 in terms of those models. Okay. Hopefully you see where that starts to fit in with all the other models that we've talked about. Think about the extension program development model that we looked at that has the 4 phases, right? So each of those phases has evaluation built in, and each of those phases builds on the next. That's laid right here in Kirkpatrick's level of evidence. So, and in terms of where those levels fit, think about them in terms, short term and long term. Short term, you can certainly measure participation, that's reaction. Satisfaction, that's reaction. You can definitely measure that in the short term, okay? You can definitely measure knowledge in the short term, okay? So people can come, like we talked about, they can come to one session. We can do a pre-test and determine what they know about that topic before the session. We can do a post-test and see how much they learned about it post-session. Might have been a 2-hour session. That's short term. We can measure those kinds of changes short term. Maybe some behavior change, but probably the behavior change, the economic change, the environmental impact. Sorry about the typo there. Those are long term. So they're going to come to a series of events. Okay, it's going to take them some time, and I don't know if any of you have taken 410 yet and have looked at the adoption of innovations and how that happens over time, but it's not something that happens with one interaction. Typically, it takes people a number of interactions, and it takes them some time to process information before they make a change. Because making a change is not easy, right? People have they have to make the decision. They have to figure out how to implement it. It might be costly. In the beginning, it might cost them some money up front. It might cost them some time up front. So we have to convince them that in the long term, it's going to be more efficient, more profitable, more beneficial for them to do that. So it's going to take some time for that to happen. That's why we say that behavior changes and adoption of practices and those economic impacts, et cetera, those are longer term changes. Okay, just some things that we'll talk about quickly here is, things like secular trends. Okay, they can have an impact on our evaluation. Secular trends are things that happen over time in a culture. Okay, so it might be that, something 9/11 is a secular trend. Okay, something that really changed. COVID had a huge impact, is a secular trend and really changes the way that people interact. That's also an interfering event. Okay, so those two kind of go together, but they're things that happen in society, in a community, maybe it's nationwide, that could have an impact on our ability to deliver or the effectiveness of an educational program. We talked about maturational trends. That might not just be kids, okay? That might not just be youth that mature and just change and learn things over time. It could be that we're talking about adults and, again, things that are happening, uh, things that are being promoted in society. Maybe there's some, big push on social media and some things that are being shared widely on social media that changes the way people think. That's a maturational trend. That's something where the thought process has matured in someone's mind, changes the way they think about a topic. Okay. Uncontrolled selection. We talked specifically about our target audience and how important it is that we have our target audience involved in our program. Uncontrolled selection, because our programs are voluntary, because our programs are open to all that want to participate, typically, you have people that may show up to participate. You don't have a lot of control over that. They may not fit specifically into your target audience. So, in order to control uncontrolled selection, if that's possible, you think about ways that you can limit that. We're not trying to keep people from participating. We're just trying to focus our program on those who need it most and those who we think we can have the greatest impact with. So, like we talked about, location, time of day, childcare, those sorts of things that might help make sure that we have the right people in the room participating in a program can help with uncontrolled selection. Some things that you have to consider, reliability and validity. We talked a little bit about that, but reliability means basically that if you did this evaluation, if you asked these evaluation questions to the same or to a number of groups over time, they would generally be you generally get the same results. So if you've been consistent in the way that a program is delivered year after year after year, you should get about the same results. So that means that your evaluation is reliable. Validity means that you're measuring what is taught. So if you've got a teacher, a person that's implementing the program, that's out here teaching one thing, but the evaluation is asking different questions, well, it's not valid. So you want your evaluation to be specifically aligned to the content that's being taught. Okay, that's what validity means. Having a poor choice of outcome measures, so where your outcome measures don't match up with what's being taught, you're not going to have success. If your evaluation is based on the outcome measures, but that's not what's being taught, you're not going to have a good evaluation. The Hawthorne effect basically says that when someone knows they're being observed or evaluated, they'll behave differently. Think about kids. If a kid knows that there's a monitor in the room that day that's monitoring a teacher, they're going to behave differently than normal. If they know they're being watched on the playground, they're going to behave a little differently than normal, right? And this could be very, very applicable to adults too. It's not just for kids. But when someone knows they're being monitored or watched, they're going to behave a little differently. That's what the Hawthorne effect is. Delivery contamination, basically, it's anything that you do to try to steer a target audience towards a certain answer on an evaluation. So the way you deliver that evaluation, if you're doing anything to try to influence them to answer the evaluation in a way that would be more beneficial to you, that's delivery contamination. Okay. And then missing information would be, if you didn't think you were successful in one aspect of the program and just decided not to ask that question, well, that's not good. We want a total picture, right? We want to look at all the information that we can gather about a program in order to be successful. So, just to summarize and to wrap up, evaluations have value when they're useful, feasible, proper, and accurate. We've talked a little about each of those. We want to have all four of those aspects uh, built into our evaluation plan. If it's not useful, if it's not feasible, if it's not a proper program to evaluate, and if we're not going to evaluate it accurately, then let's move on and find another program to evaluate. If we don't understand what the purpose or need of an evaluation is, or if the data will not be used, we don't need to evaluate it. Okay. So don't ask a bunch of questions. Don't gather a bunch of data that's not going to be used. And then, like we talked about, a lot of one-time programs would not be evaluated. There's no benefit. If it's a one-time program, again, what's the number one reason we're evaluating? Whether a program should be continued. That's the number one reason that we evaluate. If it's a one-time program, probably don't need to evaluate it because we're not going to continue that program anyway, right? So, just to wrap up, hopefully, most of you have gotten your proposed evaluation plan topic into me. If you have not, you're going to need to email that to me, and we'll go back and forth if we need to on email. But I think most of you are in the discussion thread, have that in. I've already replied to you and given you a little feedback. If you have questions about what I replied, or many of you just, the response you got was perfect choice, great job, I like it. So if you got that, keep plugging forward. And as we go through, our next lecture will be talking about how we focus the evaluation. Well, that was my comment to many of you, was we got to focus it down. Well, you don't know how yet. We haven't talked about it. So you're going to get that over the next couple of weeks. You'll begin to understand that. When you think about a target audience, some of you are going to need to focus in a little there on who your target audience is, and I can help you with that if you need assistance in putting that together. So keep up on your quizzes. Make sure that you've got your program identified that you want to build your evaluation plan for. We've got a few more quizzes before the end of the month where we'll have a midterm exam that will be online. That'll be due. It'll be opened up around September 30th. It's due on October 4th, the midterm exam. So it won't open until towards the middle of that week is when I'll open the midterm. But be thinking about how you prepare for that exam, and basically, if you're participating in these lectures, maybe take a few notes. Make sure that you're paying attention to the quizzes, that you're getting those questions correct. If you missed something, go back and figure out what it was, because many of those midterm questions will come from our quizzes. Not all of them, but many of them will. So make sure that you're keeping up there. If you have any problems, or if there's something that you're not understanding, do not hesitate to reach out to me, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I think that's it for this week. Thanks, and gig 'em. Have a good week.